Well, welcome to the Unwound podcast. We're really excited to have John Ray with us. John is an exceptional luthier. He lives in Granada. He has embraced, he might correct me on this, but he has, as far as I can tell, embraced the Granada tradition of guitar making. And we're really looking forward to hearing him tell us about that tradition, along, of course, with his own instruments and approach to making them. As ever, I'm really happy that we've got David from DK Classical Guitars. Hopefully, between the two of us, we'll manage to coax some interesting pieces of information, knowledge, and expertise from John. But welcome, John, and thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Hi, John. Good to see you. Good to talk.
Nice to put a face to a name, David.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, John, you're originally from Canada, I believe.
That's right.
Is that true? Could you give us a little bit of background about yourself? And especially what how did you get into guitar?
My father played the guitar a little. He would play and sing. No classical pieces for him. And that got me interested, but it wasn't until the university years I took a few classes. And I still think today that I could never have been any good playing. And I just didn't feel I had a talent for it. I wasn't advancing very quickly. But as so many of us have, I fell in love with the guitar. It just seemed the perfect instrument, so versatile, so beautiful, so omnipresent, really. And so I thought I had to do something. If I wasn't going to be a player, I had to enter that world somehow. And it was my guitar teacher who put me on the track of Spain. Said, I bought my guitars in Spain on a trip there, and that's where you have to go if you want to learn to make guitars. And so when I got the money together, finished my degree, spent a year working, I came to Granada for a year. That was the plan. Spend a year here and learn, go back and be the king of the guitar makers in Canada.
So was Granada your first choice to come to Spain? I mean, or was there a reason where Granada was where you ended up first?
Not originally. I knew I needed to be in the south, from what my guitar teacher had said. And I didn't know of Granada's reputation until I started to enter the world a little bit, and the guitar making experience, and suddenly it was Granada is the only place. There's a huge number of well, as you know, of great guitar makers here, much more than any other Spanish city right now.
Yeah. So did you just kind of pull up at some luthier shops and say, can I watch you making, or do you take on apprentices, or how did you actually kind of get involved with the guitar makers?
Yeah, not easy. Basically, they limit themselves to taking on their sons, their nephews, their grandsons, and some more than other are a bit jealous of their knowledge and their experience, but not exclusively so. I'm now in the position that they were in when I showed up, and I have people showing up at my door now, and I universally say, I don't have time. I'm working on my project here, and I can't help you. So, and that's what most of them said to me, if they were open to it at all, if they were friendly, if they were open to the idea of someone coming in. So I ended up actually in Malaga on the weekends with a violin maker. He was my first teacher. But he started students off with a guitar. He had a rather negative view of the guitar.
Ah,
Luthiers are the creme de la creme, and guitar makers are lesser somehow, and the guitar is definitely lesser than the violin.
mm,
But I made a guitar with him,
Mm.
and then I came back to Granada, and I found someone working here who was willing to teach me everything I needed to know.
right. Okay. And who was that first Granada teacher?
Rolf Eichinger, he's a
Yes.
German maker. He
Yeah.
passed away in 2009.
Mhm.
Wonderful guitar maker, wonderful guitars.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we're aware of a number of his pupils, if you like. So were you his first apprentice, as it were, or had he started before that?
He was always very open to teaching. It was like a bubbling force within him to pass on everything he knew. He was very generous that way, very demanding, and not always easy to get along with,
Right.
but absolutely willing to teach.
Yeah.
There's some Germans who were close to him and are working today in Germany.
Yeah.
I never worked in his shop,
Mhm.
except for at the very beginning. He had me doing some work for him, but basically my shop is right next to what used to be his shop. And so, he was in and out of my shop, I was in and out of his shop. So I do feel like he taught me very actively, but it wasn't a traditional European apprenticeship, if you will.
Right. So can you fill us in just a little bit of background about Rolf Eichinger? Because I believe he had a dealership in Germany, am I correct?
That's right.
He felt there wasn't maybe the same amount of guitars coming through or something like that. So why he went to Spain was it something like that?
I think it was passion about guitar building. He was I think he studied industrial design
Oh, wow.
and the guitar. He was a guitar teacher. And at some point he set up this shop to sell guitars. And his interest in guitar making came from his travels to Granada and probably other places to
Okay.
meet the guitar makers and buy the guitars.
Yeah.
And so he just got swept up in it, as we do.
Yeah.
And started building in Germany. Well, he did a short apprenticeship, if you will, with Manuel Bellido, and had a guitar which was sort of half done, and then he finished that guitar with Antonio Marin. So you've got the two superpowers in Granada who have influenced him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
In terms of your training, when you first going to a violin maker, how much of that training was simply getting to grips with woodwork as such? Because I noticed that you mention your entry into this as a guitar player, going to guitar lessons, them suggesting that you go to Spain. I mean, how good were you with your hands before you?
Actually, as a linguist, my degree was in linguistics, and my guitar playing was very, very rudimentary. So, and that's actually how I was able to make a living for the first 10 years that I was here in Granada, is teaching English. So yes, there was a struggle with the woodworking. I have always been good with my hands, but when you make guitars, you need a lot more than good with your hands.
Indeed.
So yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. How quick? How so you obviously managed to attain those the required standard, as it were. How long did it take though?
Well, first of all, it took meeting Rolf Eichinger, because the violin maker, I think that was an important part of my learning. But you can imagine someone who doesn't really value the guitar doesn't have the deep knowledge to make a great guitar. So that's one thing that it took. And time. I made my first decent guitar 10 years after getting here. And that has a lot to do with Spanish wine and party and pretty girls. Maybe you've been to Spain before, you know about this.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. That's all positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was 24 when I got here, so you got to live, right?
Yeah,
yeah, that's so.
very good.
So obviously studying with Rolf Eichinger, already very much in the Granada tradition.
Mhm.
Now, how much of that was a conscious choice, or was it simply that he was the one who was willing to take you on, and so you ended up being immersed in that tradition through him, or was there already an attraction to that particular school of guitar making?
Definitely. I had met some people who were helpful, without actively teaching me. Our English maker, Jonathan Hinvis, and Antonio Marin. They were both very helpful when I had questions. Just in terms of encouraging me to get started. So there was already a respect for the Granada School and a desire to be a part of it. But it's true that Rolf was the only one who said, "Why don't you take this shop next to mine and I'll help you."
Mm. Yeah.
And today I think I won the lottery that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, from what I've heard about Rolf from other guitar makers who've come after you, as you say, I've got maybe maybe four, I think, who worked with Rolf. And yeah, they're all excellent guitars, in that tradition. I believe you also make flamenco guitars. Was that something you always did from the start?
Myself?
Yes, flamenco guitars. Have you always?
Yes. The first guitar that I made was a Cypress guitar. Sort of destined for flamenco. I don't make a lot of flamencos these days. People want most of my clients are for classicals or these historic copies that I make.
Yeah.
Which are up until now classical.
Yeah. I'd like to get more into the, I'd like to explore the, what makes the Granada School distinctive in more depth in a minute. But just a quick, since you mentioned flamenco guitars, and since there'll be people watching this, who are, at, at all levels of playing, experience, knowledge, what is it that, what would you do differently when making a flamenco guitar? How is it different from your classical guitars?
That's a fair question because different makers will do different things.
Yes.
It's not always like if I will tell you what I do, but that won't be the same for everyone else.
No, of course.
I believe also that back in the 100 years ago, whatever or more, they didn't really differentiate so much. Am I correct?
That's right.
Classical and the flamenco, they just made a guitar.
That's right.
Is that correct? Yeah. And it would be used for both.
Yeah.
And am I correct in saying it was kind of by the time Segovia came that more differentiated in a way?
Yeah.
That happened before that? I have to say.
Yeah. I can't think of in terms of Segovia. I have to think in terms of Santos Hernandez. Because that was, for me, that was sort of the time. I mean, he had a lot of specifically flamenco clients, and he was extremely intelligent and extremely good, and I think he was able to establish that those two different lines.
Right, okay.
I can't attribute it only to him, but I think there was that's sort of the time that it happened.
Yeah.
Of course, the development of playing ties into that as well. And I mean, if you think classical guitar playing has evolved a lot in the 20th century, well, you absolutely see the same for flamenco guitar playing. I mean, what flamenco guitar playing is now it would in some ways be unrecognizable to what it was 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
That it's perhaps evolved even more than than classical playing. So I suppose that two the evolution of two styles simultaneously means that they become, or the differences become more pronounced, and that's going to be reflected in guitar making. You're going to be wanting to bring out certain frequencies and certain things.
Right. I think that certainly happened.
Yeah.
But to some extent, they're coming back together now.
Oh, okay.
One thing, the flamenco was always Cypress, and I still love, for flamenco, I love the sound that Cypress has. But a lot of people want the negra with rosewood usually.
Mm.
And they play it more, they might be doing solo playing. And so, they want a little more singing, and they want a little more, on the trebles, they want it to come out a little more in the way that a classical guitar has to. So there may be a movement back together to some extent.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a myth actually as well that flamenco players are just, in terms of their sound, just kind of have a bad sound because they need to project. In actual fact, the great flamenco players have tremendously beautiful sounds. Sabika said, he absolutely made the guitar sing, albeit with that percussive volume that's required, that the style requires.
I'd agree with that completely. But to some extent, some of the most famous flamenco guitars don't have a good sound themselves. The guitars themselves, but they have that sound, right? I'll often compare it to the pre-war Martin Dreadnought. That's the sound, for playing acoustic guitar, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and there is a guitar which has the flamenco sound, and that's what the flamenco players are looking for, and it's not necessarily, a versatile or a full of nuance sort of a sound. It's one sound.
Yeah. That's interesting you mentioned that, because do you think that modern Granada, in your own style, modern Granada makers are trying to really recreate the sounds of the 20s, Simplicio and Sanfilio and these people? Obviously these guitars are now 100, 120 years old, so we don't know what they were like when they were brand new, obviously. So
yeah, I can't make that sort of sweeping statement about everyone.
Sure.
I'm doing that. I'm trying to find the things we've lost. From Torres and from Santos and Simplicio. And I think all of us are trying to get a great sound, trying to get the most malleable sound, the best bass for the player, so that they can change the sound the way they want it. And some of these flamenco guitars I'm talking about have evolved into something that's not that. I mean, they're large productions, they're maybe factory guitars, and so of course they can't do what we're doing. They can't search for what we're searching for. So it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Well, let's I think pick you up on something you said there, which I think is going to be really interesting to explore. What are the things that you think we've lost from the makers that you just mentioned? Torres, obviously. You mentioned a few others as well. What qualities are you trying to recover?
It's qualities that the classical guitar as we know it, because I think what do you play generally, Ian? Are you a traditional guitar player?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I play. Yeah, only traditional spruce.
Okay, So maybe I could say we're
Likewise.
on the same page here in terms of,
Likewise,
Very
yeah.
much, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I know how your guitar type.
right, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So these are qualities that the traditionally made fan braced guitar still has, but the personality, the warmth, in some cases the projection is lesser. You know, you might have, it might seem like you have more volume. A brand new cedar top guitar might sound just huge, but if you go up on the stage on it with it and play it, you might not hear it at the back of the hall. And so I think, yeah, I think we've lost something, and I'm still not sure where it is, or where to find it, but it's in those some of those historic instruments.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of noisy guitars now, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they have the best projection.
That's right.
I know you've done a lot of restoration, and that's a topic that we definitely want to get into. But just a kind of anecdote. I maybe mentioned this in one of the other episodes, David, but I once had someone trying out a series of old guitars. It was in the Metropolitan Museum, New York. Of course, they've got Segovia's, Ramirez, Manuel Ramirez, and the 37 Hauser. Of course, he wasn't trying out those because you're not allowed to play those. But but he was trying out some of the others. There's a Flater, various, beautiful guitars. I just happened to walk in to see the guitar, and this guy was playing them, and he was playing them really well. He said he had a concert coming up where he'd be playing through some of the collection. It's a very dry room, and I stood at the back, listened to him play a few. The one that had by far the best projection at the back of the room was the Lacotte.
Mhm. Well,
You know, it just the sound was so focused
mhm, mhm.
that particularly the treble just reached the back of the. There's a purity of that sound. I know, of course, that's a completely different kettle of fish from the fan based Torres style that we're discussing here, but it kind of illustrates the point.
Yeah,
Up close, that's not a noisy guitar.
no,
Probably
no.
didn't feel like the loudest guitar to him.
That's very likely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had much experience with Lacotte, but I had his contemporary La Prévost. I had a guitar in the workshop some years ago, and the workmanship was amazing. And not just that it was prettily done, it was an excellently made instrument. I think there was another peak, in that period in Paris, where they were just doing amazing work. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's a topic we could
Yeah.
go off on a big tangent there. But
Yeah.
maybe I'd like to actually get back though to the qualities of the fan based Spanish style that are a feature of your guitars. You've restored a lot of guitars. You've worked on a lot of guitars. Maybe you take us through some of the special examples that you've worked with. But I'd also like to ask how guitar restoration has influenced your instruments.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've worked on a Torres, which actually belonged to the third wife of Andres Segovia. So it's in the Andres Segovia museum in Linares, which is about an hour and a half from here. And I've examined a number of other Torres guitars, but this is the only one that I've worked on. And when you're working on a guitar, you get you get a much better sense of it than you can any other way. I mean, I'm sure a good player gets a very good sense of what it's like, but in about different qualities of the guitar. So in the same way that building a guitar allows you to understand much better your future as a guitar builder, examining a guitar to that extent and repairing something that has failed and bringing it back up to speed, also does that. It gets you inside his head, right? So there's things that they were doing which I still have been unable to do. Some of these the thicknesses they were working with.
Mhm.
I've been unable to replicate them. I've tried, and the guitar has collapsed.
You mean they're so thin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Specifically the top, so
Yeah.
lightly braced and so thin.
Right.
And you try and do everything that they did, and if you go all the way, or in my experience, when I've gone all the way. So
these guitars have held up structurally over hundreds, 120
right.
years. Yeah.
I mean, generally, a guitar that's held up hasn't been played very hard.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And hasn't been exposed to the elements.
Yeah.
In any way. But still, for the guitar to hold up all that time,
Yeah.
and you can string it up and play it at tension is quite amazing.
Yeah, because most guitars now would be bought by amateur players like myself, and not, taken around the world that Ian does, into all sorts of humidities and temperature and aeroplanes and everything. So yeah, but yeah, it's interesting, as you say, it's hard to replicate that, just new. Yeah. So it must be a different, it must be an additional skill set to go back to an old guitar and, rather than working with brand new materials, take it apart and bring it back to life. It must be.
Yes, and I defend, I believe that one should be a guitar maker first in order to restore old guitars, but I know people who aren't and do a great job, because it's a different skill set.
Yeah.
I think you need the understanding of how the guitar works. You need to be able to say, okay, I've been there, but it's not what we do every day. No, not at all.
Yeah. It's a fascinating world, the old guitars. It's really. I've only very recently begun to learn a little bit about them, to be honest. I've got to know a few collectors, let's say, and just begun to put my toe in the water with these. So my knowledge is growing all the time, but it's pretty sketchy at the moment. So yeah.
What was the year of the Torres, incidentally?
84, I think. It was number 57 of his second period. So it's published, the process is published on my blog.
Yeah, well, we'll link to that in the.
Very good. Yeah,
blog, so.
yeah. I'll send you the specifics of that.
Are there any other outstanding instruments that you've had the privilege of restoring?
There was a Vicente Arias from 1900, which was actually, it was in Granada, and someone I know came to Granada and bought it and then brought it to me. And he didn't know anything about it. Like he played it and it worked, and he was excited, and he paid quite a bit of money for it. And he brings it to me and he says, what can you tell me about this? I mean, I look inside and I get out my mirror and I say, oh my God. And he went white. And I had seen a double back. And I knew it was a double back because there are two sort of sound ports in it about bridge height. So, I'm looking inside and I can see these two holes in the back. And then I start realizing that it's, the body's quite thin because it's got this double back in between. Anyway, an amazing instrument. He's recorded with it. I had to take the back off to repair some cracks in the double back. I'm really unwilling to take the back off a guitar. I hate taking the top or the back off a guitar, which you have to do a certain amount when you're restoring. But it's one of those things that can define the instrument. When you glue a back on one of my guitars, when I glue a back on or glue a top on, depending on how I'm working, like that's it. You know, the guitar is the way it's going to be. You know, you've still got to do a lot of work. You still have to glue the bridge on. You can still affect the sound to some extent, but that's the guitar. So I always feel like I'm stepping where I shouldn't be stepping when I take a guitar apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that double back you talked about, is that a similar thing that Contreras did in the 80s? So
Similar, he called it a double tapa, didn't he? Yeah. I think he used spruce, and there was a larger opening in it. I don't think it was, but I'm not sure. I've never looked at one.
Right.
But yes, a piece of wood, you know, at some point in the body of the guitar, and in this case, just the little two holes.
Right. And do you think that in the Arias case, do you think that made a difference in some way to the sound or whatever? Is it hard
Absolutely. It sounds different from other Arias guitars I've heard. I tried to copy it, and that was my biggest disaster or my biggest fiasco as a builder ever. It didn't do what I couldn't do what he did, you know, the double, like, and the big difference, like, I know that if I had made that guitar without the double back, it would have been a good guitar. I mean, I had made 150 guitars by then.
Yeah.
And so this bloody thing that he put in there, and I don't know why he put it in there. Anyway.
These things are fascinating guys, aren't they? Absolutely fascinating, yeah.
I mean that's why we started doing these talks, wasn't it, David? I mean, it's precisely that illustrates it precisely.
It's unknown fact.
Why did it work in his guitar and not you do exactly the same thing?
Yeah.
What's the you know what's the it should have worked the same way, really, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
And no doubt if he were to try some of your peculiarities as a maker, it would he'd fall flat as well. And
probably. I think the big problem there was that I didn't know why he did it. If I had known why he did what he did, then I might have done it a little differently, or just an informed decision, and working with intent and that sort of thing is really important.
And do we know if that was a one-off, or do we have that?
It was not. It was not. There is at least one other with holes, similar to this one, and I believe there are a few with a solid double back, like no holes communicating the two air chambers. He was incredibly inventive and experimental, and then his rosettes. I'm sure you've seen the Arias rosettes. They're just amazing.
Yeah. I guess it seems that guitar makers have always kind of tried to innovate in something. We tend to think maybe nowadays with the modern constructions, double tops and lattice and all that they're somehow doing some, well, revolutionary, but guitar makers were always experimenting in some way, I mean, was this always, well, not always, but with a view to making the guitar a louder instrument, basically a louder instrument, that could fill bigger halls and all that. Was that always an issue going back?
Sorry, what was always an issue?
Just in terms of trying to make the guitar louder in the concert hall, that it could fill a bigger hall or whatever.
I don't think so.
The way the double top people today will claim, that it's a bigger sound and all that.
I think there was a time when guitar makers, we knew our place. Our place is the church, or the king's audience hall, or the group of friends around the fire. I'm thrilled that people will play my guitar in a large hall, but so often, you know, you find that they're amplifying it, or that you know, they want one of these tinny, loud double tops or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of it comes down to how you play it as well. You know, there's different schools of teaching methods for playing, you know, and the way Ian teaches and plays is very much, you know, making use of the whole guitar, if you like, you know,
Mhm.
driving the guitar so you get everything's available to you, you know. I'm aware that others don't really do that so much, you know.
I've been told by some teachers that you know, the young people who are playing these and being told to play these I'm not sure how we can well, these guitars that I don't like, let's call them that.
Oh, yeah.
Double tops and the lattice.
Yeah.
They're not learning how to get a good sound out of the guitar because it's lost on that guitar, and they're not learning to project because the guitar projects for them.
Yes.
And so there's a
Well, they think it does. Yeah. You have put together a book, edited a book,
yes.
on the Granada School of Guitar Making. We're going to link to all that in the description as well. You had Angelo Gilardino write a foreword for that book. He had this very interesting phrase describing Granada as the guitar's Camelot. You know, the Camelot of the guitar. Has this kind of mystery to it. I'd like you to unpack some of that for us. I mean, really want to know what it is that makes the Granada School of Guitar Making special.
All right. I think everyone should read that foreword for that book. And the new version of the book, it's been out of print for 6 years now. And the new version will be out at the end of this month, I hope, or, you know, August, everyone's on holiday, so it might be September before it's actually available. Today, it's mostly about the history. Our school, the Granada School, is so important because of its history. Because today, everyone who had some interest in the Granada School or the Spanish school has taken what they wanted from it, or has dived into it. You'll find people all over the world doing the same things that we do. Maybe all of us do it here, you know, not the same thing, but the same kind of a direction. But as I say, all over the world, people have come here, learned something, taken it away. A lot of us have taught overseas. You know, things have been published. The internet is so, you know, good at showing everything to everybody. So there's an incredibly long tradition, a centuries-old tradition of instrument making in Granada, even before the guitar became what it is today, or could be called a guitar even. And then in the 18th and 19th century, Granada came into its own as a guitar making center because of the demand. Richard Brunet has an article called the Cultural Origins of the Modern Guitar, and he talks about how there was a high gypsy population here. There were a lot of café cantantes, which is where flamenco was performed back in those days. And we needed more guitar makers. So of course, more guitar makers came out of the woodwork or moved here or whatever. And as we move forward, things like Antonio de Torres built his first guitar in Granada. I mean, that's for us, that's a really big deal. You know, he was from Almeria, and he worked in Sevilla and then worked in Almeria, but he built his first guitar in Granada. As far as we know, the first guitar, which had a bridge with a removable saddle, was made in Granada by a Granada guitar maker. The first guitar, on this note, I'll say the first Spanish-made guitar with a fingerboard glued on top of the soundboard was made in Granada. So yeah, it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
To talk about the Granada School and what it means. Now today our guitars are a little smaller than guitars you'd find in Madrid. The doming, the arching on the top can be a little bit higher than some other places. Depending who you compare it to, to what extent can we talk about schools anymore? Like the French school. Is everybody following Boucher and Friedrich? Well, not anymore. The English school, what does that mean? Does that mean Romanillos, or does it mean Panormo? So yeah, you need something to compare it to. But there are some aesthetic characteristics. Again, back in the 19th century, the three-piece back was really common. And that may be as simple as the fact that it was hard to get good wood here. Granada is quite isolated, and was much more so then. And it was not a rich, it was not a Madrid by any stretch. So yeah, I like to talk about the history more than about what we do today, except that we do harken back to that history, and we do have access to guitars from the 18th century, and we do try to capture what we can from those.
Yeah, it's a truly continuous tradition. Yeah, a living tradition, obviously, which has been built on and developed all the time by people like you. But
and that continuous tradition is really important, because there was kind of a break in Madrid. I think they were doing a pretty similar thing with Santos and Esteso and all of the students of Manuel Ramirez. But the Jose Ramirez style of guitar kind of took over. These other guys, didn't have anyone who took over from them, or took over in a very different way. And so the Madrid guitar became the Jose Ramirez guitar. And in Granada, we kind of carried on with that Southern Spanish tradition, that Torres tradition. And it became as I said before, we did some teaching, people coming here and ourselves going overseas. And I think we managed to spread that around again in the world. And it's been a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But would you say that that Jose Ramirez style of guitar, I don't want to push you on this point, because it's kind of an impossible thing to answer, but you think that's the point at which there was a break then? That the kind of the Madrid making was really in line with the Granada tradition then, and until the time of Ramirez, Jose Ramirez.
Well, we're talking about things that I have no direct experience with, except that Manuel Ramirez himself, said that he followed Torres, and I've restored a Manuel Ramirez guitar as well, and seen a couple. And then when you see a Jose Ramirez guitar, they're really very different. They're they might be a tablao style guitar, which is sort of has kind of a cylindrical curve as opposed to a more of a dome, and they're very interesting guitars. They're very good for some people, and then as that evolved into a larger, long scale guitar, there's a big difference between those two schools.
Yeah. Of course, was it? I might be wrong in this, but was it Manuel Ramirez actually that used to? Did he try and pass off a few guitars as Torres? Was it?
The story that the family tells is that he showed these Torres guitars to his friends, looking for their approval and their, oh, isn't Torres amazing? And then he would take off, you know, the label that said Torres and show them that he had made it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, did he take that further and try to make money off Torres' name? Apparently not, but
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
Good story.
You know, regardless actually of the answer to that, you know, it does show a very self-conscious, you know, idea of continuity
yes.
with his making.
So where do you see the future going with the Granada guitar? As you say, you have people coming to you regularly asking for an apprenticeship or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, are there apprenticeships in Granada that, you know, as we would have known them in my younger day, you know? So if not, then how do people learn to keep the tradition going? You know, or is it just within families or whatever?
Oh, boy. I feel like I've been complaining too much already about double top guitars and about, you know, factory made guitars. So here we go again. There's not much in the way of apprenticeships. I do know some people from this tradition and in this area who are taking on students from the German Luthier schools, German guitar making schools, and so, you know, they'll finish their course and then they'll spend a year with. I'm thinking of Andy Marvi, who's a German maker who works here, and Daniele Chiesa, who no longer works in Granada, but was formed in this school.
Yes.
I mean, it's more complicated. He went to Cremona and did the violin making course. So there's a whole another level in his work and his learning. But both of them will help in that way, and I think that's a great thing to be doing, and I'm glad somebody's doing it.
Yeah.
But what's going on here a lot is makers who, in my mind, have not made enough guitars to be teaching anyone, or possibly, you know, can't make a living making guitars. They're, you know, bringing in students one after another, you know, 6 at a time, 4 at a time, and producing these guitar makers. And I don't know what kind of quality and what kind of, and, you know, if I were to teach someone, to what extent could I say, I'm part of the Granada school and I'm teaching you? A lot of people would say, all right, sure, you could say that. But other people would say, no, you know, you were taught by a German, you're from somewhere else, and you're not part of the Granada school. And certainly there is a point where you are part of the Granada school. I mean, there's one guy here who makes tops that are completely flat, and that's not even a Spanish school. And he's teaching all kinds of people. I mean, more power to him, but that's not what you're asking about. You're asking about, is the tradition alive? Are there people? And yeah, there's some young family members working in the workshops. Not too many, but enough, I think. People who come to Granada to learn and you know, move here are generally interested enough in the Granada tradition to embrace it. And then, of course, you know, someone who does learn with one of these people who I don't approve of are always free to, you know, go out into the workshops and ask questions and show their work and come into the tradition as they if they choose to. So yes, we're full of guitar makers and the tradition is alive.
Good. I guess as well, there's many more. I don't know of any when I was young, but college courses which teach guitar making throughout Europe. There's
Yeah.
loads of them.
Mhm.
So I guess we would hope they're all doing the right thing. And the ones I know, I know some very good ones.
Mhm.
Some maybe not so. Got a variance like anything in life.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's some very good schools in different parts of Europe. And interestingly enough, going back to Granada's influence on, the guitar makers of the world, I'm not sure he still is, but the head of the guitar program in the Belgian school, Walter.
Yeah.
He was a very good friend of Rolf's and visited him a lot, and I know that he learned a lot from Rolf.
Yes, I've played his guitars. They're excellent. Yeah, and I've seen some of his students' guitars as well, and they're very, very good.
Mhm.
And in Glasgow here, we've had a bit of that as well, because Michael Ritchie over here
Mhm.
taught a little bit there as well, and he's helped a lot to at least have some of that coming through. So yeah, there's life there.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's it's all been really, really interesting, fascinating actually. And it must be special that you are, carrying the tradition on in Granada itself. And you've been there for a good while now.
36 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Great.
yeah, just about native.
It's just about. I will always be just about.
Yeah, that's yes.
No, I shouldn't say that. I feel very, very accepted, and I mean, I have a son who's 17 and raised him here in this city, and that's a huge step, towards
Yeah.
acceptance in a community, having a family,
Sure.
and then doing things, like this was my baby. This is the original book. About the guitar makers.
Yeah.
And that was something that I started, and it's been good for everyone.
Mhm.
There were some
Yeah,
complaints
it's
about how I did it and
Yeah.
why it was this way, and should a foreigner be doing this sort of thing, but it was a good thing. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to be contributing.
Yeah. We'll look forward to the new edition very much. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in the meantime, I'll link to information about that book. Obviously,
Okay.
to your site, to your blog,
Mhm.
anywhere else, obviously, that you would like links to, obviously, especially places where I
All
don't
right.
know what your arrangements are for people when they're buying one of your guitars, whether you encourage them to come to you directly or work through dealers, but certainly can link to any of that
Mhm.
in the description as well, because I think I think a lot of people are going to be interested in your guitars. They'll want to look far more, into them, and so anything we can do to help with that, we'll link all of that. But once the new book is out, I'll
Mhm.
update the description for this video and make sure that that's out there and available for
Okay.
people as well. So, but thanks so much, John, for doing this. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, John. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, really good.
Very
Very
good.
informative.
Thank you very much. Yeah, pleasure to
Yeah.
participate.
Great stuff.
Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this this episode of the podcast. I certainly have. So until next time, all the best.